Thank you for listening to Shulchanaruchharav.com.
What is the difference between Rashi and Rasham matzos, and how particular is one to be to try to get the higher graded matzos? So many matzah bakeries offer matzos which have written on the boxes Rasham, and matzos that have written on the boxes Rashi. The Rashi matzos being significantly more expensive than the matzos listed as Rasham. What is the difference between them, and should one be particular in getting the more expensive matzos? So to understand this concept, we must first introduce one of the criterion that are binding towards matzah that one desires to fulfill his biblical obligation of eating a kazayis of matzah on the first night of Pesach with. In addition to the fact that the matzah must be matzah and not chametz and follow all the detailed laws of how matzah is properly baked to ensure no leavening in the process, as well there is an additional requirement for this matzah, which is certainly not chametz, to be eligible for a Jew to be yetze his mitzvah with on the night of Pesach. And that is the idea of lishma, that the matzahs must be guarded and made for the sake of the mitzvah of eating matzah on Pesach. This is similar to other mitzvahs in which lishma is required, such as the writing of tefillin, the making of tzitzis, and so on and so forth, in which simply not doing it lishma can invalidate the item to be used for the mitzvah. And so too with matzahs, it must be made lishma for the sake of the mitzvah of eating matzah. Now, as a bylaw of lishma, perhaps we should also require that not only is the matzah made for the sake of Pesach, but that also all of its process of being made is done through a Jew, as only a Jew is valid in making something lishma, as opposed to a Gentile or a machine. In other words, perhaps due to the law of lishma, it's not just enough to have a Jew supervising the process of the making of the matzah and saying it's for the sake of the mitzvah, but he must actually be involved in the process itself. Practically, it's ruled in Shulchanaruch in chapter 460, halacha 1, that it is debated amongst the poskim if you must actually have a Jewish hand involved in the work, or it suffices for him to simply supervise for the sake of Pesach, for the sake of matzah's mitzvah. And the final ruling is stringent, that we must have the Jew actually involved in the process, and therefore the kneading, the rolling, the baking of the matzahs must all be done through the action of a Jew and not of a Gentile. If it was done by a Gentile, lichatchila, when we not eat these matzahs on the night of Pesach to fulfill the mitzvah of achilas matzah, even though for certain these matzahs are not chametz. All this is an introduction to our original question: what then is the difference between Rasham and Rashi? Rasham and Rashi are not names of people, not names of great Rishonim, but rather an acronym that stands for Rechaim Shel Yad Rashi and Rechaim Shel Mechona Rasham. A human mill versus a machine mill. Based on everything we just explained, the question comes up. Since we initially require that a Jew be involved in the actual process of the matzah baking for it to be lishma, what about the grinding of the kernels into flour? Does that too need to be through the hands of a Jew? Or can that be done through a Gentile? So this too is debated amongst the poskim. Some say it should be done, or it has to be done by a Jew. And others say it can be done by a Gentile so long as a Jew is supervising. Or for that matter, it can be done by machine so long as a Jew is supervising. And practically, how do we rule? The halacha is like the latter approach, that we do not require a Jew to be involved in the grinding of the grains, unlike by the kneading and onwards that a Jew is required to be involved. And thus you are allowed to grind the grains, the kernels, through a machine, through having a Jew supervising the process. So was the Alter Rebbe in 453, halacha 16, based on the Taz L'Chek Yankiv and other poskim, although the Bach, as brought in Bir Halacha, holds of the former approach that a Jew needs to be involved in this process as well. These two different approaches is what created the difference between Rasham and Rashi matzahs. Rasham is basic halacha, that you don't need a Jew involved, so these grains were ground through a machine, were supervised by a Jew, completely kosher for the night of Pesach, but do not follow that extra opinion who says it also has to be done by a Jew. While Rashi is that a Jew, Rashi Matzos means that a Jew has done the actual grinding, not through a machine, but him himself. He is the human grinding mill. Thus sufficing even for their opinions who require a Jew to do the actual grinding. Now we understand the difference of hiddur between the two matzahs and understand the difference in price. It's much cheaper to simply have a machine work for you, do all the work, the machine doesn't take any money, rather than have a Jew working very hard like a horse that you have to pay per hour, big gelt. And of course that big gelt doesn't come out of the matzah bakery's funds, it comes out of the consumer's pocket who pays for those matzahs, called Rashi, due to that hiddur. Bottom line, while there are many Yidden who are machmir or mehader to get the Rashi matzahs, especially for the first night of Pesach, according to the rulings of the Alter Rebbe, this is not required, as we already said. And practically the standard practice of most matzah bakeries is to only have rechaim shel mechona, the wheat that has been ground through a machine and a Jew supervising, but some matzah bakeries do offer to the public an added type of matzah of rechaim shel yad, which is, as we said, more expensive. Regarding minhag Rabbi Seinu Nesienu, so in the different memoirs it is recorded that specifically a hand grinder was used for making matzahs in Lubavitch, and as the Rebbe Rayatz writes in a letter that kemach shmur refers to flour that has been ground by hand and not through electricity. However, perhaps this was due to a suspicion of chametz in the machines and not specifically due to the need of lishma. This matter requires further clarification.